Well, thank you so much for the glowing introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with the community today. We're excited to talk about a topic that's near and dear to our heart with this world of external and alternative data and what it means in the areas of enriching predictive models, and analytics, data pipelines across the board. Our goal, really here as an organization is to help shepherd and support, our customers and partners on their analytics and data journey and help them change their relationship with this kind of wild west world of external data. And that includes not only how to overcome some of the hurdles to procure it, but how to effectively leverage it to enrich your predictive forecasts at scale. So some of our objectives today is really to address head on kind of what is this wild world of alternative data, and why is it so important, but the types and value drivers that it can introduce, as well as addressing some of the just natural challenges that that this ecosystem presents, and then how we see firsthand this weaving into and maturing so many organizations' data strategy. We've also prepared a couple of really interesting use case examples that we had the opportunity to see firsthand that I think will resonate really well for this community and this audience, as well as some emerging trends that we're starting to see that are becoming really, really opportunistic for this world of external data as an enrichment mechanism and augmentation mechanism to traditional data science work streams. So this is our commitment for today, and we look forward to the questions that this starts to drive. But I think this idea is not a novel topic. It's not something new, and there's a lot of people talking about this, whether it's McKinsey or Gartner or MIT or our friends here at the ODSC. There's a lot of discussion around external and alternative data, and what we're seeing is really very few organizations taking full advantage of the data that lives outside of the four walls of their organization. And from our perspective, it's somewhat of a little missed opportunity, but could be a competitive advantage if properly leveraged, and if being kind of the operative word that you'll hear a couple of times in some of the stuff that I'll be speaking to today. So external data, sometimes it's called that, sometimes it's alternative data or control data. It has many names. I was laughing with Balin. I think it's like the Babe Ruth of data types. Which one is the great Bambino in here, right? But quite simply, this information is information that's obtained from outside the organization or non-traditional channels to really help supplement internal data, gain some additional insights or perspective, but I think most importantly, provide an added layer of context as to what's driving some of the internal measures that we look at to run our daily decisioning as an organization. And this space is by nature very diverse, but can really offer an enrichment mechanism to augment the internal data, fill those gaps, even validate some of the findings or hypotheses that we're starting to see as we get through some of our traditional experimentation. But what I see is really this providing much more of a holistic view of operations, and see where market dynamics and industry trends are impacting how we plan as an organization, how we enrich these into our predictive models, and really any other data initiative that we've got prioritized on the roadmap becomes very, very important. And as I said at the beginning, this is our space. This is what we live and breathe every single day as an organization. And no surprise to many here, but the landscape of alternative data is super wide, it's super deep, and extremely noisy. I feel like you kind of need a compass or a Sherpa or a guide to navigate it sometimes. But I think what I also see here, and my team would echo this as well, is the application for this data can be as diverse as the data itself. And when you look at just some of the outlets, that are not even scratching the surface here, you can start to see why. When you look at geospatial data, that becomes a really interesting, utility for point of interest analysis, foot traffic trends, volatility in the real estate market. And firmographic information from both public and private business is a great mechanism for CRM enrichment or market or competitive research. Consumer level data, this is probably something that a lot of folks on here are looking at, but it can be a whole other animal. If you've ever tried to leverage census data, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what's interesting is consumer spending and search trends and other demographics really becomes an important component to the story in so many different areas. Things like weather data, we're seeing a lot of application for not only agriculture, that's kind of on the nose, but also looking at anticipating supply chain disruptions or organizations that operate in heavily seasonally driven industries. Macroeconomics are great. Other industry specific outlets in the healthcare space or hospitality, serve a variety of use cases and needs. But the moral of the story of that monologue is there's really no shortages. And I think the real art comes in being able to find the data points that are uniquely important to you and integrating them into your existing work streams as both an enrichment and augmentation mechanism. And what's also interesting is when you start to take these external data points and weave them together or cross-pollinate, this data becomes an even more valuable utility in a myriad of use cases. For example, market profiling and segmentation, looking at stacking on consumer spending or housing developments, labor statistics, starts to present a really interesting signal or story as to what's going on. State of the industry, type analysis, your S&OP processes, your risk mitigation activity, with the aforementioned, supply chain disruption could be due to catastrophic weather events, geopolitical conditions, a pandemic. It really is leveraging this type of data becomes incredibly more valuable. And, I think the context that the data surfaces that's unique to you can really help to drive and change or shape the daily decisioning, if you can find it, right? And I think, again, if being the operative word as we look at the space, it's kind of a mess when you think about kind of the challenges that are in front of you or hurdles to procure it. When you look at where you sit and literally thousands of external sources of information that could be helpful if I could access it, but many of these things are manual to procure. So now I'm dealing with the world of CSVs and Excel extracts, or maybe I have to build and maintain an API, or we're doing screen scrapes, or building Python scripts to automate some of this type of stuff. And then by the time I get to get the data to me, it's not normalized. Those puzzle pieces don't fit together. So now I've got another layer of time and complexity that gets introduced from both a data engineering as well as transformation aspect, and really all of this before I can even hit start. And what we're finding, and this is probably a lot of head nodding on the other side, but the time to do this could be 30 to 40% of a data scientist or a data engineer or an analyst's time. And this is not only a very expensive way to spend our time, but when you look at it in hindsight, the ROI isn't there if I have to do it this way, or it just the inherent bottleneck that this looks like on this slide, it becomes an afterthought, and now I'm not seeing the full picture. And I guess selfishly from our perspective, we think that there's a better way through both technology and the partners that you choose to work with and engage with in your ever maturing kind of data and analytics strategy. But I think it starts there, with the plan that you introduce. And what I'll talk about, again, this is not a novel idea in the broader lens of your data ecosystem and your analytics strategy, but I think it's, our point of view is really an important aspect to be on the table with some of your planning discussions, regardless of your Fortune 50 company or a small startup or somewhere, anywhere in between. These points are really, really relevant across this kind of maturing landscape. And from where we sit, we're starting to see this really interesting convergence between kind of where you're at on your analytics journey and what the kind of evolved steps start to look like in your data strategy as you look beyond just the data that lives inside of the four walls of your organization. And as you progress from kind of level one on the left, where you're in this kind of infancy and experimentation phase, to level 5, where this is a part of the organization's daily, decisioning in DNA, we see the importance of this enriched and supplemental data to become incredibly more important to see the whole picture of reality. And Balin hears me say this all the time. It's really closing that gap and showing reality on reality's terms. And really, as I see this migration from experimentation in what could be a data science vacuum to really starting to push and scale models into production, these external factors, market dynamics, or other non-traditional data not only improve our predictions, which we'll talk a little bit about here with some examples, but it really changes the way that I see so many companies are able to compete in these fast-paced and ever-evolving industries. And I think the ideal state at the end of this gets to where the idea of searching for and procurement of new and non-traditional data just becomes a part of our daily practice, and it itself becomes this perpetuating machine that continues to evolve your data ecosystem and the insights that you're able to glean out of it. This is the picture in the space that we saw, and then everything changed, right? We got hit in the face with this world of generative AI and ChatGPT that just explodes everywhere and starts accelerating, the utility of data, but also breaking down some of those aforementioned challenges and just barriers to entry. And from our perspective, really is offering a next level way to enhance and accelerate kind of this type of data into your analytic strategies. It should be, if it's not, on the table of discussion for any organization. And I think, again, the application and the value drivers are pretty interesting. Whether it's, kind of this world of data augmentation or building synthetic data that didn't traditionally exist or could cover a wide range of scenarios or edge use cases, or even using it for outlier detection, but not only finding the outliers or anomalies in the data pattern, but correcting it. And something that's important to our customers is like providing that added layer of context and human interpretability to very complex modeling outputs. Summarizing things like variable importance, or even recommending other alternative ways to incorporate data or what else I should be looking for. I think that there's real practical utility as part of the data strategy. And I guess good news, there's an upcoming webinar that Anna was talking about here at the beginning that I think will further reinforce and go much further down the rabbit hole of this topic. So I guess there was a selfish plug, I guess, for Anna and the upcoming webinar series. So I want to give you a little bit of background around our organization and dovetail some of these thoughts and topics into some real world use cases that I think will really resonate for the folks on this call, as well as some interesting emerging trends that we're starting to see and kind of how this stuff starts to manifest. So as I said, we live and breathe in this space. What ReadySignal specializes in with our clients is really helping them identify these leading indicators from third-party and alternative data sources and provide this holistic view of those market dynamics and trends that are unique to your existing business and even hyper locally inside of your business in the portfolio of either customers or products or locations, and helping you really get very specific on what's moving the needle or starting to indicate headwinds or tailwinds as a business. And what we've done and how we serve this is through our massive data catalog that's very wide and diverse, that sits across a variety of categories, some of which I talked about today, some of which I didn't. And at its core is this AI-powered recommendation engine that can help you quickly find all of these relevant external factors, normalize them in a way that I can start to pass them off and meet you where you're at. And our whole goal here, again, is to help you quickly source and identify these meaningful insights and get them into the data pipelines and the work streams that are now going to be enriched or augmented with this really important piece of the story and help you do that very, very quickly. So I want to pass off kind of, what we've talked about up to this point and pass the spotlight to my counterpart, Balin Springer, to talk a little bit about some of these real world examples and trends that we're starting to see that I think, will provoke maybe some questions, but maybe some net new ideas for the teams on this call today for further exploration inside of your daily practice. Balin?
Great. Thanks, Matt. So I think we're going to do a couple things. We're going to just walk you through a few use cases and just give you some examples of where we've worked with teams and where those teams have found some external factors and how they've used those in different ways and the types of impact they had on their business. And also do just kind of a quick kind of demonstration or process walkthrough, very tactical in terms of like what is our process and how do we go about doing this? And again, whether you do it kind of with us or just independently, the process that we go through to help identify these external factors and make them really valuable in your work. And the use cases that we're typically seeing and going to walk through examples are of, largely first and foremost is forecasting. So whether it's demand or sales or inventory, we're obviously seeing teams and many projects significantly improve the predictive power of their forecasting models by incorporating these relevant external factors into their models, along with what we call their internal data, incorporating that with their pricing, their promotions, and kind of any other internal business driver. And maybe more importantly, identifying the lead indicators to the business to really help enable that powerful forecasting. The second category of these cases often fall in on the marketing side of things, and we see several instances where obviously fully understanding the external factors that are driving business conditions, either favorably or unfavorably, is crucial to telling a full story around the impact of media and marketing and that investment. And this can range anywhere from the upfront planning process to just strategically and proactively, planning to deploy the investment to either offset, some economic headwinds or even take advantage and capitalize on expected tailwinds in business conditions. And these external drivers are also really important in evaluating marketing performance and being able to understand how those economic conditions are impacting the business either positively or negatively, so you can isolate that and truly tease out the incrementality of what that media investment is driving. So obviously quick examples are if you're deploying media investment into the market, but you're in unfavorable economic conditions that's driving your business down, when you start to look at that, you want to understand what is that expected downturn and how is that media investment possibly offsetting that. Third category is segmentation, and this tends to be very straightforward in terms of leveraging just external demographic data at possibly a zip code or census block level to understand local market dynamics and business performance. But we've also seen teams get really creative. In one example that we saw was as a retail organization was looking to expand and they were trying to monitor and understand their overall business performance, for their most profitable stores. They also found a relationship in terms of the proximity to a Whole Foods location as being a great economic indicator at this very hyper-local level that they could then use to evaluate other markets. And so I'm always fascinated when I see these stories of folks being really creative in testing things that are maybe less intuitive and a little bit out of the box to answer some of these questions. And lastly, some teams that we're working with, even outside of all the like advanced analytics and predictive modeling, are simply including these data into their business intelligence as a way for to monitor changing conditions overall and give all stakeholders in the business access to this context, so everyone's operating on the same page. All right, so we'll walk through a few examples here, and just to put this in context and quantify some of this a little bit. But the first example we wanted to share was a manufacturer in the agricultural space. And this company was providing food service products to restaurants and retail stores, delis, you name it. This is a robust organization. It's responsible for both ends of the supply chain. And historically, the team's institutional knowledge and industry, kind of just overall industry experience operated as to some degree, a good enough estimate of expected demand. There were so many folks that knew how the business operated, and they could really get a good sense of that expected demand just from their time in the business. However, then 2020 happened, and the pandemic completely, obviously, disrupted the world and this business. And so, coming out of the pandemic, obviously, as the world recovered, the team found that their historic institutional knowledge actually was no longer valid and no longer providing a decent estimation of the upcoming demand. So they started to invest in building more robust predictive models, with the internal data that they had available. And although they had a firm grasp on weather-related data and its impact on their crop yield and supply side of things, they weren't leveraging any other kind of external data to help with their downstream demand forecasting. The models they created with the internal data only had an error of around 20%. And when they put that error in context of the volume they were dealing with, this had significant impacts around production planning and inventory allocation. And ultimately, business stakeholders didn't have confidence, in these estimates in this model to make business decisions around those numbers. So, the team started to explore utilizing some external and alternative data to help kind of tighten up that and get a better sense of the business conditions and how their products are operating in that. And so they discovered that not only was weather and seasonality, also impacting the demand side of their equation, but they also identified several economic, and labor type, measures that ended up being leading indicators of their downstream demand. So once they started incorporating those factors into their forward-looking models, they were able to reduce the error from up around 20% down to 6%, and so significantly increasing their predictive capability to inform their production and inventory allocation. And so this is estimated to be about a 1.5, and this is actually even a little outdated. I think this has increased since then, but about a $1.5 million just operational efficiency gain by taking this approach and including this analysis as part of their forecasts. And so I think this is just a great and very simple example of finding and incorporating the right external business drivers into the analysis just resulted one, in a better model and more confident decision making, and more importantly, a significant financial impact for this organization. The next example we wanted to share it's a similar flavor, but with a different spin to it. So this is an example in the financial services industry. And the objective of this team was they were just looking to predict daily trade volume with the implications of making sure that they had enough kind of cash on hand to cover as necessary. This team had a model in place. They, as you would expect, they were evaluating the market data from days and weeks before to help inform what they expected trade volume for today or tomorrow would be. And they were also including a few industry-specific external features. And so they already had some external features included. Overall, their model had acceptable performance. Everyone was generally pleased with it, but there certainly were time periods where the error distribution, kind of moved well outside that acceptable range, and they started asking themselves questions like, "What are we missing? How can we help to fine-tune this?" So this team then began to explore some additional external features and really opening the aperture out of maybe what they thought to be kind of the most intuitive and obvious features within their industry, and started to look into external data under other industry verticals as well to see if they could find some additional features to help. This team, they identified 20 features or so to begin iteratively testing in their model and looking for some performance improvement. And through this process, they discovered some non-U.S. kind of market and financial features that were helpful. They also ended up rolling in just some personal consumption expenditure, which both proved to be significant leading indicators to improve the model performance. And maybe the surprise in this process was that they also discovered that the crude oil index was a valuable leading indicator for their business. And again, this is just something that wasn't intuitive for them to test originally, but provided a significant improvement once they started to include that in the model. And I think this is something that we are seeing a lot of. We see this theme that like data scientists often have, a set of 5, 10, 12, whatever external features that tend to be the go-to features that are proven to be helpful, time and time again. But often they don't typically expand beyond that, somewhat personally curated set of features. And a big reason for this, as Matt mentioned earlier, is that it is incredibly time-consuming and a very manual process to go out and procure and maintain all of this, new feature sets. And so, again, like we're seeing this as a trend and important to find the right partners, work with the right technology to find scalable solutions to help test beyond some of these limited data sets and open up the opportunity to identify things that may be less intuitive business drivers that can be really helpful for these analysis, similar to the crude oil index in this case.
Yeah, it's always amazing to see just how like one or two extra features that we weren't even thinking about can have such a material move on the model error and just its impact to the business. Super fascinating.
And our last example, and this is something that we're seeing as an emerging trend as well, and it's this idea of like hyperlocal or hyper scalable forecasting. And so this team that we worked with, they had a diverse portfolio of products, and they were being delivered to the end consumer, again, either in retail or restaurants and stadiums, arenas, just a whole slew of places where the consumer purchased their product. This team had a forecast model built for their demand, but they had also started with just like looking at the entire product portfolio in total, together. And they obviously included all the internal data to their business, and they found that gas prices was kind of the helpful main economic indicator in there. And so they did have some external context in there to help inform that model. But overall, the forecast accuracy was just not robust enough to be useful. And so this team shifted to a scalable kind of forecasting approach where they were building these demand forecasts at each kind of individual product SKU level. And, we're going to show a few examples here, but this was, across 100 different products. And so through this process, it began testing unique external features for each product SKU and looking for all those nuances as to how those different economic factors could be driving the end consumption and for any one of these products, again, where they were being consumed. So it was fascinating to me. So although all of these products were essentially in the same family and similar type products, they had significantly different leading indicators in terms of how what factors were driving each of these different SKUs at retail versus the restaurants and the stadiums, et cetera. I also thought it was really interesting to see we did end up seeing that gas price did show up as a significant driver on the restaurant side of things, along with vehicle sales, but those didn't show up in many of the other product SKUs. And then we started to uncover additional things on labor force and household income, et cetera. And so end result here was kind of moving from that just overall demand look across the total product portfolio, and then starting to dissect that and really understand the significant drivers for each particular product. Significantly improve the robustness and this team's ability to provide some accurate demand forecasts, and again provide additional confidence within their organization around those numbers to make business decisions.
Yeah, it really is the art of finding kind of that right mix of cross-pollinated features that at that local level that are just so significant to what's driving that external demand. So I think maybe Valen, it might be helpful. It might be interesting to open up some additional questions for the team here to show kind of how we approach this problem and maybe address any questions and feedback that the community has. So I'm going to stop sharing on my screen here.
Okay. We did have a question that came in during the presentation.
Great.
It is, I have a relationship with San Diego Opera nonprofit and have been thinking about how I can help them with their predictive models for their ticket sales. These last few years have been hard with the state of economics and people's expendable income. I'm hoping you can help me understand how to integrate these kinds of external factors.
Yeah, that's a great question to kind of lead into like how we approach that, right? I think the operative word there is finding the right external factors, and seems to fit a very specific kind of like geography and like profiling that geography and kind of demographic set in addition to some of these other factors. So I think Balin, this may be a perfect question leading up to this. So I guess I would encourage you to watch, and we'll kind of step through it in practice.
Yeah, and we actually just recently worked with an amusement park, which may be similar in the fact that like we were trying to answer that similar question around attendance, and so obviously there were like very in the amusement park space very specific seasonality components, and then certainly some as you would expect weather. But then we also started to tease out different like household income type things that were historically driving like increases or decreases in some of their attendance. So but yeah, so I'll just walk you through a quick I guess demonstration of what we're of how we approach this. So I'll share my screen. You can see it, Matt?
Not yet.
It is up for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so we'll walk you through in terms of like again our point of view on this, but I think so this will be in the context of our platform, but I think the process is translatable outside of our specific platform too. And so like ultimately, right, so we've curated all of these data sources, managing these APIs, and so like we want to have all this stuff in one place to answer these types of questions. To say like, okay, we're looking to like understand ticket sales for this nonprofit, and that could be an impact of again weather, demographics, economics, et cetera. So we set up our platform so that we can easily start to like have one source to look into that. And so what we've done is like we set up this recommendation engine that lives in this auto discovery component within our platform. But this allows us when we work with our customers they can upload whatever variable it is they're trying to explain and kind of define either the time and geograin that they're operating in. So in this case, it may be important to look at the state of California, but then our users can upload a data set, and then we'll just go out and start to find things that look related to that. And so I did set up an example here where we have a data set for domestic air travel. And so we want to answer the question, like, what are some of these external factors that would be most highly, correlated in this case to domestic air travel, which would be a starting point for us to start to think about what those categories and what those features are that would be applicable to this industry. Again, not suggesting the correlation is causation, but we wanted to provide a pickaxe. So instead of trying to test 1,000 different features, that we start to point us in the right direction in terms of what features would be most valuable. And so in this case, we've curated, what we call a signal, which is just a set of, bespoke set of features that are related to this domestic air travel. Again, as a starting point to think about the analysis. And so things that we start to see here are, unemployment claims seem to, have a relationship to the air travel, the personal consumption expenditure. And here we're also like our process we've set up, like we are very focused on looking for leading indicators. So we're also testing lags in the data through this process because we want to not only find those measures that look to be important, but we want to start to see like our, in this case, the personal consumption expenditure lagged by 2 months looks like it could be a possible leading indicator. And again, retail sales, and so again, we've kind of used this process as a way to like how do we take it from 1,000 features down to 20, 30 some odd that you can start to develop some hypotheses around and do some testing. And so a lot of the stuff you would expect to see, unemployment rates, the money stock measures, a lot of economic factors, but every now and then through this exercise, here's an example, is the this wood pulp index. We see things that we wouldn't have expected or thought to test to begin with, and so a lot of our users end up finding like little nuggets of information that again weren't intuitive to them that could be helpful. The home price index, etc. And gas prices, like, oh, these make sense, right? And this is also just an easy way to start to find that. The other thing that I point out is that as just a best practice, again, we've set up our process to do this automatically, but as you start to think about these external data, we need to start to look at like what is happening with this data before we start to like put this into a model. And so again, best practice in terms of as you think about these external features, doing all these tests to see, is there autocorrelation in the feature? Is there seasonality? Is there a trend? What's the distribution of the data? And so, running those tests, and in our case here, like we've kind of written some rules around this once we evaluate the test so that we can see like, okay, we do see autocorrelation in this data and it's not normally distributed. So okay, we need to difference this data, and we'll apply the order norm transformation in this case to normalize it. So again, making sure that not only once you identify what those external features are that are important to you, that you go through the process to evaluate what those features are and how to handle them prior to a model. And we've kind of set this up so for our purposes that we can apply those. In this case, it was already lagged, but we can difference it by time period, et cetera, and just have that data ready to go before it goes into the model. So the other thing that might be interesting is we've been, see, can you see my Jupyter notebook?
Not yet. There may be just a lag on my side.
There, how about now?
Still just seeing your web browser.
Oh, one more time. How about now?
There we go.
All right.
Webinars, am I right?
Yeah, great. And the other thing we've done is to like kind of push all this functionality into like R and Python libraries, and so like we have these libraries set up so again we can not have to do all this stuff in another GUI and bring this data directly into kind of where folks are doing the work, et cetera. And so in this case, so I've just created a data frame here with that domestic air travel measure that I was looking to get some context around. So that's there. And then, we have some, we just have an API endpoint with an access token, and we can run some functions in terms of, taking a data frame, defining what kind of overall geo grain and time grain it is, and send that to the platform. And again, run that initial kind of pass to now that we have this signal and this data set kind of ready to work with. So this is the same thing that we saw in the GUI here, but now it's just sitting in a data frame, kind of in Jupyter. And so this is where then, we kind of curated this data set. You have, 20, 30 some odd features that you can start to test. And in this case, you can also see that this has already had the lag applied to the personal consumption expenditures. So any transformations you've done can be pulled right through, but this can now be joined with my internal data, and then I can start to see like, okay, are any of these features actually helping my model, helping my analysis, and start to really test through there and really find the thing that's going to be most important to your business. And then maybe the last thing I'll show here is, you see my browser again?
I can.
Okay. Yeah. And then so and then some folks have also, kind of guided us towards like, okay, you helped us identify like what, kind of what features are, seemingly important, but how do we really get down to what are those that are most statistically significant and going to be helping my business? And so we've also just created a process to build the forecasting, and similar to what we saw there, we can look at it at different time and geo grains and we can define what forecast period we're looking for. And once again, just kind of upload that target variable you're looking to forecast along with any of, you could also bring some of your, quote unquote, internal data to the table, whether it's, pricing, promotion, marketing, et cetera. And then we'll test that along with all of the external features. And so again, with this domestic air travel, data set, like we ran the forecast, just looking to create a forecast for 3 months. So we trained on data through the beginning of January here, and then just started to forecast out for Q1 of 2023. And so we have that set up, and really just starting to look for, like, are there headwinds or tailwinds that we're seeing? So like, okay, is, the next 3 months where it looks like we're a little bit down over the past 3 months, as well as down year over year. And so from a business perspective, now that we're seeing that, what can we do? What should we be doing to start to counteract that? And in this case, like after going through that exercise, right, we had a whole list of features that we saw was that looked like they would be valuable for this forecast. But at the end of the day, going through the process, we found that the personal consumption expenditure, lagged by 5 months and difference, that was the most important feature. And so this, again, whether it's going through, our platform or not, this is the process that we've typically worked with our customers to help them whittle it down from a sea of external data that is, available to test, to get it down to a manageable amount, and then really helping, figure out what is the most important piece for that particular business, for that particular use case.
And I think the other thing to call out is like just the transparency that we try to provide, so that we can pass this off to your data science team so that you can see what's going into this output, but also the model object itself. So again, we can kind of meet you where the work's happening. And if you want to further fine tune some of the model code that's happening in there, we want to make it super easy for you to use this as an accelerant, or kind of not start with a blank canvas. To help support some of the work streams that you guys are seeing.